Blue skies means fun days. Helping skydivers with tips and techniques about safety, training and fun jumping from those who know. Hi and welcome to Blue Skies Fun Days. How long should we wait after a person or group has gone before we exit? While I recently mentioned 80 knots and 8 seconds as my rule of thumb, I promised a more detailed discussion. Here it is.
So I think when it comes to creating separation amongst groups, a lot of times I just want to make sure that we're really talking about being able to create that horizontal separation. I know sometimes people are keen on just saying like, well, if you're pulling at 4 and I pull at 6, I can just jump out right on top of you, right? And again, that's not a safe practice, because if that person that's below you has a problem and they need to deploy earlier, or if they have a premature deployment or something like that, then that vertical separation really means nothing. So when we're creating separation amongst groups, the primary thing that we're trying to do is create horizontal separation so that we don't run into any issues. What we were trying to achieve is that we typically want the slowest falling people exiting first, and typically the more people you link up as a whole, that group is going to fall slower than an individual. So that's why typically you would see slower falling groups like belly flyers go from largest to smallest, and then ultimately the faster falling groups like free fly going again from largest to smallest. And the principle behind that is essentially when you are floatier, you're going to be aloft longer, and so therefore you're going to be more susceptible to drift, and because of that we want to be able to use that to create more separation amongst the entire load. So that's the principle essentially behind that. In addition to that, the missing element there is we need to also take into consideration what the ground speed of the aircraft is. So where that comes into play is we want to typically have a minimum of 1,000 feet of separation amongst the groups. A little bit more is actually better for safety, but it might actually cut into in terms of like the performance, in terms of like how much fuel you're burning and everything else, right? So I understand that a business isn't a big fan of doing go-arounds, but safety and performance are always going to be butting heads, right? When it comes to creating separation amongst the groups, the primary factor that we look at is the ground speed of the aircraft. And that's actually something that's pretty easy to find, especially if you're near the pilot, you can take a look at the GPS and it'll usually say it right there. If the pilot isn't too busy, you might even be able to just ask like, hey, what's the ground speed doing? And you want to make sure that you actually use the number from when the plane is actually configured for the jump run. I think a lot of times people will call back the ground speed way too early, right? The plane is still climbing and it's not going to best reflect the number that we actually need. In principle, basically, if the airplane is flying relatively fast, so let's say 100 knots, right? I'm talking like the otters that we have here at Eloy, then we're able to leave less time because obviously we're covering a lot of ground very quickly. And so in between the groups to get those 1,000 feet minimum, we're looking at about 6 seconds. And personally for me, even if we were flying faster than that, I don't really like to leave anything less than 6 seconds, but that's just a personal opinion of mine. However, if we start running into, let's say, some stronger upper winds, right? And so now the airplane's ground speed is being affected by that, and let's say we're maybe at like 60 knots or something like that, then it's going to take more time for us to have that separation being built, right? So in that case, if you're going about 60 knots, now we're looking at an exit separation of about 10 seconds, right? The other rule, Garnett, that we've talked about, I think you like to implement the 88, right? So if you're going 80 knots, it's going to be about 8 seconds, and that's very easy to remember because those numbers are kind of paired, and I like that. I think that's great. And so if you're going to be going slower than that, you need to leave more time. If you're going faster, right, then it would be a little less. But you can build an intuitive sense for that actually with practice, and one of the things that we also made available on our website on the Access Tools page is we actually have a calculator for that. So if you guys want to check that out, you can also just click around on that and kind of get a sense for it.
Go. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi.
For more tips and techniques, click subscribe.